I am finally back for the second algorithm video of more than likely 4 algorithm videos. So I know it's been a minute. Many things are happening. I did the weekend after my first video get food poisoning. By the way, again, I'm gonna give a fair warning because I gave the warning last time and the warning was not processed by some individuals. That I am a storyteller and I'm chatting about algorithms and I'm talking about my experience with algorithms. So if you're here for very quick bullet points or like the typical like Gen X like pointing at words or whatever, like I'm not that person. So if you don't like rambling or you don't like deeper information or discussions, then this is not the video for you. And I'm only saying that not to run you off, but because I'm trying to be kind. I don't want you to watch it and get aggravated and feel the need to stop your day and ruin your peace by leaving a comment. I mean, it does help my algorithms even if they're negative comments, so go ahead. But the point is I'm gonna chat. So with that being said, I did get food poisoning that weekend after the first thing, and it's one of the downsides of a small town is everybody knows the health inspector. The mom and pop shops do pretty good because they're hands-on. The owners are there like living their lives in the restaurant, so they have higher expectations. But like chain restaurants in a small town, in my experience, have very little accountability and everybody knows the health inspector. So I feel like things get sort of overlooked, or like there's a grocery store in the area that very consistently has spoiled or expired food on their shelves, and it's insane to me. Like I know sometimes that happens, but this is like almost every section that you go to, you have to check the dates on things because they're probably expired. So I did get food poisoning. I got quite dehydrated all through that next week and a little anemic. So I was not feeling great. I still got somewhere around 100 items listed that week, but it was not the, like that week I was planning on, as I said in my last video, going into hardcore again and trying to list like another 500 or 600 items, and that just was not going to happen. Then we did get the good news that my parents are officially scheduled to come home after my mom's bone marrow transplant. So she got it back at the beginning of May, and you have to stay very close to the hospital for 100 days after the stem cell transplant to make sure that the stem cells take hold and the body doesn't reject them and there's no major complications, where if you get a germ, you're very close to the hospital because your immune system is wonky. So she has made it through most of the aftermath of that and is doing well. She's had a few side effects, but they've been able to manage it. And so far, everything is looking good. And so they are actually at this point, less than 30 days away from coming home, which is just crazy, but amazing. And at the same time, it kind of shifted my priorities because I've been definitely utilizing the space, being here alone, to try to like organize. There's not a lot of space for me to work in as it is, but I've utilized the hallway and the dining room table. I've also been in the process of trying to go through the other side of their garage, which is where they have collected like generations of things, and it is stacked like floor to ceiling. And to do that, it's a lot of work. So I've been slowly chipping away at it, but now I need to kick it into high gear because I have to get all of my inventory over there, which most of it is over there at this point, but I got to finish getting my inventory over there and then continue going through all of their things we're setting aside things that can go to yard sales and things that they really, really want to keep, and trying to make that not a danger zone and also a workable space for me. I do plan on moving probably the end of this December, early January, as long as everything's going all right. My goal, which I'm trying to very much stick to, is to go back to college in East Tennessee and begin the next chapter of my life. To do that, I'm going to have to really, really hustle. I'm going to have to be on point. I'm going to have to be super organized. It does feel a little backwards because I am going to turn around in 5 months, 5.5 months or so, and pack everything back up and move again, which I've moved my reselling like 13 or 14 times in the last decade. So it's nothing new to me. The good thing is I have a lot of experience doing it, so I know what to liquidate, I know how to pack, I know how to like preemptively get myself there, but there's just my brain sort of shifted. So I started spending more time organizing, a little less time listing. I did list a little over 200 items last week, and just kind of got myself back in a slightly different direction. So I didn't really get to do or see what was going to happen if I listed hardcore again like I'd planned, but I did gain other useful information. To start, this is notoriously one of reselling's slower periods. So to break that down, you obviously have all of fourth quarter, really half of third quarter, all of fourth quarter, especially the last probably 3 weeks of fourth quarter. And then you even got through January because people get like gift cards, or they see things during the holidays they decide they want, or what have you. So that busy season really spreads out kind of like mid-August through January. Then it'll take a nosedive in February and March. There are ways to tackle that, which I'll talk about some other time. And then once people start filing their taxes and really getting those returns back, because even if you file, like most places, they don't have to send your W-2 out until the end of January. Like they have the last day of January technically to send that to you. So proactive people, like I'm a last minute person, like I will literally do it 2 days before it's due. But proactive people will start in February, especially those people who actually get a return will do it in February. And then typically it takes somewhere like 6 to 8 weeks, somewhere in there, to get all that processed and get their money back. Sometimes a little faster, but somewhere in that time range. So you're looking towards the end of March when people really start consistently getting their tax returns back, and that's when things start to amp up again. That will continue on usually through June. June starts to kind of be a little iffy, and then once 4th of July hits, because that really, like that last week of June, 4th of July, and most of July is where people, I mean, it's one of the busiest seasons at Disney World. That is one of the times where people do a lot of like camping, a lot of traveling, a lot of meeting up with family, a lot of vacationing, all of that goodness. And their money is spent elsewhere. Then they have to recoup a little bit because many people come back broke or, you know, needing to reassess their financial situation, especially right now, needing to reassess their financial situation when they get back from vacation. I wanted coffee, but I made myself green tea because I'm trying to be very, very healthy. Which is a whole nother thing that's been going on. I've been making a lot of positive changes as far as working out and eating and those type of things, and my body is just like, no, like you need to slow down. But it's all good. It's gonna level out. So that is notoriously a slow period. We are in a slow period right now. So I really honestly expected things to be worse than they are right now. I'll show you my graph. My dog may or may not have tried to run off with it earlier, so it is kind of crinkled now. But, you know, this was that giant peak where I netted like over $1,000 in a week or whatever. And then I crashed it again. Well, I came back up to 500, and these last 3 weeks, they still drifted between $400 and $500. Like, they really didn't, considering how much I lowered what I was listing, how inconsistent it was, and the fact that we're in one of the slowest periods for eBay. Even that 4th of July week wasn't bad. I'm actually satisfied with that. Obviously, that is not a livable income right now in this economy. Like, you cannot resell and net $400 or $500 and survive, because you're also having to reinvest some of that money. But it is promising to me, I guess, is a good way of putting it, because things did not completely crash. They stayed fairly consistent, which goes back to what I said last time, that if you diversify your inventory and you have a large number of items listed, then you can ride out the waves pretty easily, and still bring in enough to not just be terrified, you know, because if those had dropped down to like $200 or even worse below that, I would have been very nervous at that point. So it turned out pretty well. So today, after all of that talking, the part of the algorithms we're going to discuss is we're just going to break down the listing. Now, some of this you've probably heard in other videos, especially if you're just looking at videos about algorithms or like how to build your eBay. Some of this is fairly simple, but I'm going to try to go into each thing a little bit more in depth and just run from the very beginning of the listing all the way through, and how the different things you do within your listing can help your algorithms, or even just help your overall sales and your overall standing, which in turn helps your algorithms. The algorithms are basically just a set of rules that you have to follow, and if you don't follow that set of rules, you kind of get like sifted out. Or you can even, it's even like, what is it, Plinko on The Price is Right, I think is what it was called, Plinko, unless I'm losing my mind. Or depending on the decisions you make and what direction it goes, it can kind of like filter you into certain like seller categories. If that helps with the visualization. So what you want to do is try to make as many of the right decisions as you can to satisfy the algorithms to the point of you having as high sales as you can, and consistent sales. Consistency is almost as important as how much you're bringing in. That was one thing I hated in the restaurant business, is waiting tables is awesome on a Friday night. You know, and then you come in like a Sunday or a Monday, and when you made $20, $30 an hour waiting tables on a Friday night, now you're making like minimum wage, and so it balances out, and it's just frustrating. The same thing can happen in reselling, and you'll really be on fire and you're making good money, and then it can just tank for different reasons. And reseller burnout can be a real thing, because you are working so much and you're doing so many things and you're so dependent on yourself, that you can get discouraged over time. Like if you're trying to build up, and you're trying to build up a savings, or you're trying to make financial moves in your life, and then things just sort of keep fluctuating, you can get burnt out, because you feel like you're just running a rat race, basically. So let's start with the listing. So the very first thing, other than plugging in, you know, the first few words to find out or to start the initial listing, which I do recommend when you very first start your listing. Those first few words should be the first few words instead of the way that you want your title to be. Otherwise, because what eBay does is when you enter those words to first establish your listing, they take those words and they apply them into the title. So if you're not preemptively setting up those first few words the way you want your title to be, then you're just going to have to delete your entire title and start over again. So the best way is just to go ahead and set up those first 5 words or so the way you want your title to look, and then move on into the listing. But once you get into the listing, the first thing at the very top is going to be your photos. And photos can affect your algorithms a lot more than people realize. Technology has moved very quickly. And some people, I will say this and they'll be like, well, duh. This isn't, you're not a genius or anything. I know, well, technically I am a genius, but like, I'm not trying to act or sound like I know some mystical knowledge right now. I am very much aware that this is common knowledge to most people who are anywhere near the tech world, but many people, I included in some ways, have fallen behind on technology, and some things I learned that have been around for like 5-10 years, I'm like, what? When did this happen? Like, when did this become a thing? That's one of those things with the photos. Many people don't realize that the quality of photo that you have can be detected through the algorithms, basically through AI at this point, but it can pick up on the quality of the photo. So if you're using like an older digital camera, and it doesn't even have to be that old, because it's like progressively it's like any other corporation is trying to constantly catch up to the current standards of things and the highest standards of things. So your digital camera, or even your iPhone or Galaxy, whatever phone you're using, if it is an older version, it doesn't even have to be that much older. The max quality of those photos may not be in sync with what is being detected as the higher quality photo at this point. My phone is like, I think it's an iPhone 11. It's like 5 years old, and I'm pushing it at this point. Not only does it have some issues going on with the camera right now, and the lens primarily, I think moisture may be getting under the lens, but like the quality that this phone can take, especially at this age and with the issues it's having, is starting to really push that limit. So that is a huge priority to me right now. Obviously, I've had a lot of things going on and I have to use my money wisely, but that is one of the very top things at my one of the things at the very top of my list that I am going to try to accomplish in the very immediate future, as soon as possible. I'm trying to definitely upgrade as high as I can, which is one reason I've kind of put it off, because I don't want to go in and spend what's in my budget to get bare minimum just to turn around and need to do it again in another year or two. So I'm trying to finagle a way to get as high quality as I can. Same thing if you're doing a digital camera and you're uploading photos or whatever. You need to try to get one of the newer cameras. You need to have the better quality photos. With that being said, the way you take your photos is also important. It can pick up on the clarity, if there's blurriness, if the photo smudged if you moved in the process, or, you know, the lighting is really bad. So you need good lighting. I recommend strongly white light, a light box, something of that nature. Not only does it help with the quality of your photos, but it helps point out flaws. There are many times where I was about to sell something that in normal lighting, I did not see a flaw. And then I put it in the white light and I can pick up lint easier, so I can make my items cleaner. And I can also pick up flaws easier, and it's probably saved me some returns because I probably would not have noticed those flaws in different lighting. So I do very much recommend some type of lighting, like white light or light box of some variety. Also, try to get, you want to go as quick as you can, obviously, because you don't want to spend forever taking photos. I like to try to get a listing cranked out in 2 to 5 minutes, depending on what it is, where I feel like I'm not doing my job. I just have a high expectations of myself. That's probably, well, it's not too quick if you're experienced enough to do that. But for most people starting out, you probably want to take a little bit more time to get it right and then build up to a better speed. Just don't rush yourself, especially if you're starting out, because you can end up not noticing that the picture is blurry, or it's out of focus, or it's only halfway in the frame, or what have you. And that's just going to end up costing you time, because once you post that and you put that item up in your inventory and then you notice it later, you're going to have to go get that out, retake pictures, upload that picture, delete the ones that are bad. You just don't want to do that. You don't want to do all that. So, a couple hints with the photos too is recently I heard someone ranting about, it was on YouTube, ranting about there had been a return or somebody wanted a refund because when the item got to them, it wasn't sealed as new, and the person had only taken, because it was new, the person had only taken like a front and back picture of it, and they thought, well, it's new, I don't need to take all these pictures of it. Totally a side note, doesn't necessarily directly affect your algorithms, but if you're taking pictures of new items, take a picture of the tags, take a picture of the seals, all the seals, even if there's 4 or 5 seals on it, all the angles of the seals, because people will say that when it got to them it was not sealed if you don't have pictures of the seals, because how are you going to prove that they're fabricating a story? And it also gives buyer confidence, because if they see the seals, then they know it's new. Some people aren't trying to be crooked. Some people just are more likely to buy from you if they can see that it's actually new. Another thing, a good thing to look at when it comes to the photography, and I'm not sure, well, I know AI can pick up on this because AI can generate this. I'm not so sure that eBay is at the level yet where it's using this level of artificial intelligence and playing into the algorithms, or not yet, but study the elements of design. And if you don't know what that is, Google it, just elements of design. It is the very base foundation of art, whether it be drawing, painting, photography, whatever. And there are certain elements that play into good artwork, and you don't have to be an artist. I'm not saying you have to take it to some crazy level, but good photography requires good lighting. It's attractive in color. It's attractive in composition, which essentially is how you set up the item or items, and like your negative and positive space in the picture, meaning you don't want, your item to be here and there would be all this empty space around it. You want to try to balance that. That not only, I would be willing to bet, if it's not already being used, will at some point play into the algorithms, because it attracts more buyers. People are drawn to things that are visually more appealing. So it's worth a study. It doesn't take very long to, it's literally like Art 101. Like, you could probably learn it in a day. But to look up the elements of design and to try to apply that to your listings, because you're going to have more sales. Your listings are going to look better, and long term, it's going to help your algorithms. All right, so let's move on to the second one, title. The first 5 words of your title are the most important. Sometimes I've noticed it stretches to 6, but definitely the first 5. And the easiest way to get those first 5 words, there's a couple ways. You can go in and search through just the regular eBay search and type in the combination of words you're thinking of using and see if it pulls up a category or if it pulls up items fairly easily. I kind of do a dual thing, and I'll explain that in a second when we get to categories. But the other thing you can do is when you're going in to create your listing, as you type in words, it will pull up a bar underneath that will give you like a set of words that is commonly used for that item. And you want to pretty consistently use that set of words for your item. So like if you have, I don't know, vintage Nike shoes, men's size 8 or whatever. Normally, as you go in to put vintage, then Nike, it'll come up vintage Nike, and then it will prompt you to put in shoes, and then it'll prompt you to put in men's, and then it'll prompt you to put in size. You just kind of want to follow along with that. Now, if that bar suddenly disappears on like the second or third word, that means you've put in a combination of words that isn't typically used. So you want to back up a word and maybe try a different word. Because if you can maximize those 5 words of what are most commonly searched for, most commonly listed in that order, then essentially you're entering the title the way that most people think to search for it, which is your goal. Because the average person searching for a certain thing is going to put in a certain combination of words. So make those 5 words your most important. Sometimes it will surprise you, and sometimes you need to think creatively, because sometimes, like a vintage item, sometimes it doesn't matter a whole lot if it's new. So the word new may not be as important. Now, new Nike shoes is going to be vastly more important than used Nike shoes. So new is going to be one of those first 5 words in there. Probably potentially even the first word. Sometimes, like especially with vintage clothing, the brand name of the clothing item, people don't even know that brand name because it's so vintage and it's so obscure that nobody's going to search for that brand. So you don't want that brand anywhere near the first 5 words because nobody's even going to think to put that in there. So it's just going to immediately wash out the search. What you can do instead in those situations is think of the aesthetic of the piece, whether it's home decor or vintage clothing or what have you. You can think about the collector's market, like who would be buying this. You can come up with other combinations of keywords that are way more important. one of the things that's coming along with Gen Z is all these cores. Like, they've made thousands and thousands of fashion aesthetics, which, good on them. That's one of the cool things that they're doing right now. And it helps resellers, so don't knock it, because it feeds the vintage clothing. It even helps sell clothing that normally would have never sold on eBay. You can sell it now on Depop or eBay because it fits into one of their cores, one of their fashion aesthetics. So you can use that. Like, there are many times where I know the brand was pretty obsolete when it came to the title, and I would put the fashion aesthetic or the core as some of the first 5 words. So, for instance, there's like romantic goth, which is a little bit more of a delicate goth look, like think like Victorian vampires. And so I would put romantic goth vampire dress, you know, or something of that nature, and those things will sell so much faster if you do it that way. I probably shouldn't give you all my trade secrets, but the brand, the size, sometimes those things are a little bit less important than those first few words that people are thinking, this is exactly what I want, I need to look for it. When it comes to name brand clothing, it's usually pretty generic. Like, you want to put like new if it's new, and then you want to put the brand name, and you want to put the line of clothing, like, you know, if it's Nike Dry Fit, you want to put if it's men's, women's, or children's, you want to put the size. And then after those first 5 words, no matter what you're listing, is when you start to add in synonyms that may be key identifiers or may set it aside from other things, because somebody might want a vintage striped polo, but they're looking for orange and green because that's what they want. So putting in those extra colors of like what the stripe pattern is can help. Like the number of items and a lot people don't necessarily search for that. Sometimes in dishware they do, but normally the number of items in the lot aren't that important to the search, but they can be useful information in the rest of the title, because then people know, like when I list like toys, sometimes from the picture you can't tell immediately how many toys are in that lot, but there could be 28, 30 toys in that lot, and that's like a bigger number. So if I put that in the title, then it's going to draw people into the listing. Sometimes if you have specific defects that you need to talk about or whatever in the description, it is useful somewhere towards the end of the title to put read or read the script or something like that to try to prompt the buyer into reading the description. That's not going to really help your algorithms, but that's going to save you a lot of returns and work. And just the condition, things like that. Like, some people put free shipping in the title. I don't really do that because there's multiple ways to search for free shipping items, and it also shows that on the listing, like up front. So I don't really feel the need to, you only get so many characters in the title. I don't feel the need to waste my characters on something like free shipping. Alright, so that goes for the title. I hope that makes sense. I'm just going to move forward, or we will be here all day. The category. So this goes back to what I was initially saying about sort of searching those first 5 words. A good thing to get in the habit of doing, even if you already know the value of the item and you already know what you're probably going to list it for, and you don't really need to do a search for sold comps, right before you list the item, it often helps to go ahead and put in what you plan on putting as your first 5 words. And at some point in those first 5 words, it'll pop up, you know, the little scroll down options. It'll pop up with some of those words, and underneath it, it will say like in men's clothing, or in, you know, dishware, or whatever, you know, it'll give a category underneath the keywords that you're using. And then there'll be other options that don't have categories. If you see that pop up where it gives you a little category underneath those keywords, that's the category you want to aim to list it in. Because if you're using those keywords, that means that most people have listed that item in that very specific category. And what can happen is if you list it in a slightly different category, it doesn't even have to be a completely different category, just slightly different. It can significantly lower the odds of you selling that item because the keywords are going to prompt within the algorithms for those items to show up in that category, and people, when they're searching and they put in those keywords, they'll click on the first thing that shoots them in directly into that category. So you want to be in that category. And I say that because eBay, when you go to put in your search words or your title words to create the listing, many times the algorithms, the AI, is not picking up as well on that part of listing as it is in the search engine part of it. It will pick up on weird things. Like I've listed like a Spider-Man plush, 8 inches, whatever, and it'll put me in like vintage action figures or something. Now, a Spider-Man plush isn't going to sell. It could, but it's less likely to sell if somebody's looking for a specific plush. That's just one instance, but it can pick up, like when you go to create your listing, it can pick up on more obscure words and shoot you into the completely wrong category. So you want to watch for that. And if you search prior and you know which category you're aiming for, then when eBay sort of shoots you into the wrong category, you can immediately correct that. It's a lot more work to wonder why your item isn't selling, even though it has a high sell-through rate, and have to go back and try to figure out what it is, and then you realize it's in the wrong category and you have to change that. So just kind of doing that up front helps a lot. Sometimes picking a category that you wouldn't think of is going to help more. If an item, it may be a vintage like body powder or something, but people more than likely aren't going to use that body powder. Some people are just collecting it. That's probably not the best example, but sometimes there are things like plushes. Sometimes there are actually plushes that do worse in the plush category than they would in the collectibles category. So if you can find a category within collectibles for an item that is more of a collector's item, then do that, because it's just going to work in your favor. You want to be hitting the right market. The same with seasonal items. If you have green towels that are almost very obviously a Christmas green, don't just list them in regular linens. List them in a seasonal Christmas holiday category. Your reds, your greens, even the creepier items that you may have that might just be dolls, or they might be, black or orange sort of decor pieces, but they have like a strong like Halloween aesthetic. I often find that those things are better listed in a seasonal category. Kind of use the category to your benefit to try to boost the views from your market, because if they're getting views in a different market, it's not going to sell necessarily. But if you're marketing specifically to the person, to the viewership that is more likely to buy your item, then it's going to sell faster. Also have your store categories. Try to start those from the very beginning. I did not do a great job. I thought I was doing a great job. I was trying to make this very creative thing. Somehow I managed to make way too many categories and still not have enough categories. I don't know how I did that, but I did. And unless they've changed it in the last year, which I've been putting this off for a long time for specific reasons, if you go in to try to delete categories and start your categories over, they have like a limit of how many categories you can delete in a day or like a given period. And so I learned this the hard way. And so I got through like deleting like 5 or 6 categories, and all of a sudden it cut me off. And so I, to this day, have these random extra categories, and then I have all these other categories that are like doubled up, because I have not yet gone in and fixed all of that. Because when I did the math, I was like, it's literally going to take me like 2 or 3 weeks to get through all my categories and get everything organized again. That is something on my list in the next 2 to 3 weeks, because we are in a slow period. I'm going to bite the bullet, muck up my entire store, and redo all my store categories. But if you start off in the beginning, it does help. That doesn't necessarily help your immediate like algorithms, as far as I can tell. If it does, I wouldn't say that it strongly affects anything, but it does help when you start to build a store view, like a store following, and people are specifically coming to you to buy items. Then they can look at the store categories. If you have a viewership on YouTube or a following on social media, then they're more likely to go to your categories. As far as categories go, the only other thing that, well, the main thing that directly affects your algorithms is there are certain categories that just do better. So try to have a certain amount of inventory that fits in at least some of those categories, because that's going to boost your sales, your views, your impressions, all of that, which will help you make sales on other items that aren't as sought after. So some of those top listings are more sought after, like shoes, name brand, like higher quality clothing, handbags, purses, especially all those more designer or, you know, leather, nice quality purses. Obviously, I shouldn't say, I'm trying to stop saying obviously because it sounds so condescending. Video games is a big one. Video games, they might only sell for $5 or $10 sometimes, but they'll sell within a couple weeks. Like sometimes within one, like the last time I listed DS games, I sold 3 of them before the end of the night. They sell very quickly and they help boost your algorithms. Some harder to find media, like record albums, like the rare sought after ones, certain collectible items like collectible toys, especially, that have a very high sell-through rate. Those type of things, listing in those categories will help your algorithms. We're moving on. So, condition. This one's pretty simple. Most items have like new or used, pre-owned. Some have like new without tag, new with defects, pre-owned, what have you. Books, media, things like that will have like new, light new, very good, acceptable. Be honest is really the only thing that I have to say about this. Is if it is new with a tag and very obviously new and there are no defects, listed as new. Otherwise, do not list it as new. You need to list it as new with defects if it has some sort of flaw, or if it's missing its tag but it looks like it could potentially be new. You can do new without tags, but be cautious with that, because if there is any signs of wear, people can say this isn't new without tags, this has been used. It's always safer to downplay it than to try to make a faster sale by not being fully transparent with what you have, because your return rate and your feedback and your defect rate can break your store. It can break your sales very quickly. It is also very hard to get your top seller rating right out the gate. You have to go at least 3 months. You have to have a certain number of sales. You have to fit all these little percentages. You have to have certain type of shipping and certain, there's just things you have to follow. And if you're not, you have to sell, I believe it's 400 items every 3 months. If you lose your top seller rating, for them to even look into giving it back to you. If you're selling less than that, you have to wait a year. So if you're only selling like $100 or 100 items a month or what have you, you're going to be waiting like a solid year to even get your store reassessed for top seller rating. So you don't want to do things that could easily cause you to lose it, because that top seller rating is huge for your algorithms. It's huge for your sales. The defect rate, the return rate, all those things, even if you don't have top seller rating, is very important to the algorithms. So if there's any question of whether it's not new, don't list it as new. As far as books and media, always take it one step below what I think it is. So if I think it's very good, I put it at good. If I think it's good, I put it at acceptable. If it looks almost worse than acceptable, I mark acceptable, but in the title I say rough condition as is to make it very clear, and then I put it in the description. I much rather somebody know exactly what to expect and be satisfied than to sell something quickly or for more money and then get a return or get a negative feedback or a defect strike or whatever. The next one is the item specifics. This is a big one, and this one is a pain in my ass. This is one that I've had a conversation with eBay about, and it drives me nuts. It used to not be this way. There would be maybe a few things you had to fill in that were like item specifics. In the very beginning, there was like practically nothing like that. It was mostly all about the condition and the description. But now they have all of these item specifics. And when it comes to item specifics, they have the required ones that you have to fill in. They will not let you list the item until you fill those in. Then they have a list that's usually 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, 6 times longer. That is the recommended item specifics. You want to fill those in. You want to fill as many of those in as you possibly can. Even if you go to fill it in and it doesn't necessarily apply to your store, or there's not an option that best suits your item, you want to put like not applicable or NA or unknown or something of that nature in that item specific. Because it's not only do having those things filled in help buyers search for your item appropriately, but it is an algorithm. It is a rule within itself. And that is why somewhere on your overall dashboard, it's going to say you have 469 items that have item specifics that you could fill in to boost your sales. It's not worded like that at all. But essentially, there's a little section where it tells you how many items have item specifics that you can fill in. And they're telling you, anytime eBay makes a special little spot to tell you, this is something you could do, that is something you need to do, because that is going to affect the algorithms. I didn't take it very seriously. And finally, I started filling them in, and it made a world of difference, even though half of them were like non-applicable. And one of the conversations I had with eBay, because I got frustrated because I'd filled a bunch in and it still wasn't really affecting it to the level that I felt it needed to. There were multiple things in that conversation, but one of them was they mentioned to me, well, you still have like 269 items that have empty item specifics. Maybe try going in and filling in more of those. And I was like, no. See, the thing is that there are some categories in the item specifics that you cannot fill in. For instance, anytime I list any items in the action figures, any action figure category under toys, it asks for a grading and it asks who graded it. These are just like used, like these are just in lots for children to play with. These are not collectible toys, nor, unless it was a very valuable action figure, I would not pay the money to get it graded and certified by a certified grader. I would not do that. I just take really good pictures and I list any flaws and I say as is, as pictured. Like I'm not going to spend extra money on an action figure. Now, if it was worth like hundreds and hundreds or thousands and thousands, obviously I would do that. But most of my lots are just like little Ryan's World toy lots or Paw Patrol toy lots, or, you know, mixed Marvel action figures that have no real value other than lotting them together for some little boy or girl to play with and destroy. But in the item specific, it makes you fill those in, and those are two of the item specifics that will not allow you to put NA or not applicable or ungraded even. It just makes you try to pick one of the options. So you have to leave those things empty. And there are multiple things like that you just have to leave empty. There's also things in like clothing, like vintage clothing. I rarely take the time to find out where it was made, because people who buy vintage clothing, what happened in the past stays in the past. They're not very concerned about where that clothing was made at that point. Every once in a while, like Levi's made in the USA is better. Like certain brands, if they were made in the USA, or when they were like Nikes at different periods were made in different countries, so it kind of signifies the authenticity of that item, I will do that. But, you know, if it's just some $15 vintage shirt, most of the time I'm not going to take the time to put where it was made. If I do note it, and I remember to note it, I will. Otherwise, I put unknown. My point is that you want to fill in as many as you possibly can. Sometimes you can't. And that's bothersome, but you have to let it go. You can also, sometimes it still benefits, especially in more competitive categories or more obscure items that might be harder to find or search for. There's a whole nother section that, you know, they have the required, they have the recommended, and then they have additional item specifics, because apparently they just don't know when to stop with these item specifics. If it's more obscure or there's a lot of competition, you can even fill out some of those. Go ahead. The more you fill out, the faster your item's going to sell. I guarantee it. The only exception are just those items that are always long tail, like vintage photos or something like that. Like some things you can't get around. But otherwise, the more you fill out, the faster it's going to sell. All right, I'm going to get me a drink of water. You're not going to know I'm gone. And then we're going to go through the last 5 things, because we're halfway there. Number 6 is the description. So, close to a year ago, they started offering the... Oh, goodness. What? What is it? they started offering the option to use an AI generated description. There has been a lot of back and forth about whether or not this helps or is necessary. I would bet, I don't use it consistently at this point, I would bet that it does help. Not only does it give people sort of a more fun to read description if they read the description, but I would be willing to bet that there is a rule in place within the algorithms to benefit you. I am personally a little creeped out by it. I know there's not much I can do to stop it, but I have used it a few times, and I kind of just decided to, as long as I can, not use it for a few reasons. One, I want to do my due diligence to give artificial intelligence enough time to before it starts replacing everybody's jobs. But also, I have to read it all because it's not yet perfected. So there's the issue that it ends up taking me as much, if not more time than it would if I just put in my own description, because I do have to read it and make sure it doesn't say something willy-nilly, because it'll add in synonyms, it will add in things that make it sound like it's better than it is. It will sort of overlook the condition, or sometimes it doesn't say anything about the condition because it doesn't know about the condition. So you still end up having to read it, and then you end up still having to put in any flaws, and you still have to usually put in a lot of measurements unless you're able to do that into the item specifics or the title. And it just feels at this point like more work to allow the Terminator to come along. It is actually very good though for where it's at. Like, you hit the button and instantly you have 2 paragraphs, like instantly. And I even had one time where I was listing a Garfield, like an enamel pin, and I can't remember what the little joke was on the pin, but I hit the button, it generated the 2 paragraphs, and within the description, it did a full-on play on words joke, referencing the joke on the pin to sell it to buyers. And I was like, what the F? Like, look, I'm autistic, and I learned at a very young age that humor helps keep people calm and happy. And I was in an environment where I felt the need to try to keep people calm and happy. So I learned at a very young age to play on people's words, use sarcasm, use jokes, use humor. It was all based on patterns. Because if somebody does the same towards me, most of the time, I don't even know if they're joking or being serious. Like, it's hard for me to pick up on it in people, but I can replicate it based off of patterns. So my point is I know what mental capabilities and energy it takes to play on words and use humor based off of patterns and data. And AI just does it like that. So my point is, it is good, but it still, in my opinion, takes more time than it benefits me. At some point, I think that will cross over where it will be in my benefit to use it, and hopefully it will take a little less time to use it. And it may even come to a point to where I have to use it to be competitive. We're not there yet. So it's up to you whether or not you want to use the creepy AI version. I recommend at least 60 characters. That seems to be, from my opinion, the magic number. If you can enter 60 characters of some sort of description, in my experience, it tends to do better than just putting a few words. There are some things that I put very few words in because they're already going to be longer tail items, or because they sell very quickly. I don't really need the algorithm to help me at that point. So you can kind of play with the level of description. If it is something like a vintage shirt or something that might take a little bit longer to sell, but you don't want it sitting there for eternity or until it goes out of trend, then definitely work to put in a solid description. Somewhere around 60 words is a good point. Things that you can do to get there is you can reiterate the condition. It's always good, especially if they're used or if the condition is like lower, like more towards poor, or it has a lot of flaws, to reiterate that in your description, because the more places you have something like that, the less somebody can come back and say you didn't describe this properly. The number of items in a lot is something good to add there. The measurements, whether it's like a home decor piece or clothing or what have you. Plushes, add the measurements, any flaws. And then if you're looking for a few more words, you can be like, this would be great for a birthday, or this would be great for the Halloween season, or whatever. But try to get somewhere close to 60 characters. The pricing is a big one. eBay pushes higher value items because that makes sense. They get more fees off of higher value items. So they're not going to put the best deal at the top. Because if they put the best deal at the top all the time, then everything would sell for the best deal and they would basically max out on what they could make. They're going to try to push things that are like priced higher. That's why if you get on and search for Disney VHS or, vintage Beanie Baby, you're going to find things that are listed in the thousands of dollars at the top, and that's why people come back at their yard sales and they're like, oh, that's worth $2,000. I'll sell it to you for $100. No. It's because the algorithm favors more valuable items. That does not mean that you want to do that, because most people know to at least search or scroll a page or two and find the actual true value of something, or to find a better deal. So you want to not overprice it. In the same regard, you don't want to underprice it, because you will be pushed down towards the bottom. Even if you're a top rated seller and you have a good standing and everything else, if you can underprice other items a little bit and still find yourself in the medium zone, or even like up higher on the page. But if you underprice it too much, your listing is going to get pushed down to the bottom and people are never going to make it there. That's why a lot of people, they think, well, I'm going to undercut people. I don't really have to make that much. I only pay 10 cents or I got it for free. So I'll just sell it really quickly, and the next thing you know, it's been sitting there for 6 months, and that's because it's at the very bottom of page 6, and nobody ever gets there to even find it. Now, people can search like lowest price to highest, but there is also business psychology that people don't necessarily want the lowest price item because they think something's wrong with it, or it even is an ego thing where they don't want to get too good of a deal because they feel poor. So you don't want to severely undercut or underprice your item either. And long term, it messes up the market, which is a whole nother topic. Best offer, it's up to you. It's one of those things that 1,000% will boost your listings within the algorithms. It is not fun. You can put parameters. It's a bit of extra work to put the parameters in there, so I tend to not put parameters in there, but then I have to deal with a lot of messages and offers of people sometimes offering less than what it would even cost me to ship it to them. And sometimes you even get people who end up buying the item and then they try to leave negative feedback or say something negative because they didn't get the deal that they wanted. I don't really like best offers. It's one of those things that I feel like should have never become a thing because it's now out of control. And if they had just left it, people would just pay. Honestly, I feel like eBay would make more because people would just pay the market value. They would just pay it, and the market value would always be higher because the competition wouldn't be trying to undercut and get this best deal all the time. I would love to see a world where eBay takes that away. I'm not so sure that they will. But that is up to you if you want to do that or not. I have currently taken off best offer because what I do put on there at this point is I have switched everything to free shipping because free shipping also boosts your post. Not only is it searchable, like you can search and filter out the items that are free shipping as a buyer, but it also boosts your post within the algorithms. It's like a fast and free thing. If you have fast shipping, you have free shipping, it automatically boosts your items. So I took the best offers off and I worked in free shipping. And when somebody messages me trying to offer me something, I explain, look, after fees and my actual expenses and the shipping costs, because I do still have to ship it, it's too much of a risk for me to accept offers because I could end up working for free or losing money. But there you can use best offer. And it can help you convert sales, and if you convert sales, it can boost your overall, sales and algorithms. It helps, but at what cost is the big question. So we'll just leave that on the table. Do what you will with that. Know that it does affect your algorithms, but decide what is more important to you. Then we have the overall auction versus buy it now. Auction, when eBay first started, auction was where it was at. People loved the auction. They got excited. It was interactive. They were, it was thrilling. We've merged into a time where people either want something fast or they want it social. That's why Whatnot, it's a more social way of auctioning, and people enjoy that because there's the social element, and that's the only reason that auction platform is working, and things tend to go for a little bit lower value there too. The other way people shop now is just very quick. They just want it. Buy it now. They want it now. So the auction has all but died on eBay. I hope they find a way to fix that because auctions actually are fun and they are good for sellers too because you can get rid of a lot of things in a short period of time and make good money. It also converts sales, which boosts your algorithms, which helps your overall store. But at this point, in my opinion, it's way too risky to be doing auctions. Unless you have like a huge following, like Crazy Lamp Lady, she built her store on auctions. So she still does auctions and she has such a huge following that as soon as those items go up, she's getting bids. But the vast majority of the time, your item is going to get lost. And people don't want to sit around to see if maybe in 7 days they get a good deal on something. They're much more likely just to buy the best deal that's already there than to just sit around and try to get a good deal on something. It's a big mistake that a lot of newer sellers are making is they're like, oh, well, I'll just flip this really quick and I'll send it to auction and I'll make money and I'll make this much and blah, 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 blah. And then their item gets $1 bid and it never goes anywhere. And they're selling this thing that they could have sold for $40 or $50 for $1. And if you cancel those, not even very many times, eBay will shut you down and it'll ruin your algorithms if they don't just completely cut you off. So the only way that I use auctions is if I have something that is super rare or potentially very valuable and very sought after, and it's going to automatically draw a lot of views and attention, but I'm not quite sure where the market value is at this moment, and I feel like I could potentially make more than I would even list it for. One example was like a year ago, I was selling like a rare Pink Floyd album that was technically a bootleg. And I feel like, you know, after 50 years, if something was a bootleg, it shouldn't really be categorized as a bootleg anymore because it's literally like a piece of history at that point. But Pink Floyd found it, and while other albums from this label, it was like the Smoking Pig label, quality, trade, good, mark of, oh man, I can't remember. It's a certain label, and they have a Smoking Pig logo. And other albums under this label were fine to sell on eBay. But the Pink Floyd one had become, apparently it had been blacklisted. Like it was basically impossible to sell. And I didn't know that because I saw other albums selling on this label. So I listed it, and I'd only found one picture. I'd done a deep dive and I found one picture of it online. And the last one that had sold about $300. And that had been like 3 years ago. And Pink Floyd had sort of reemerged. So in my head, I was like, well, it's trending. This is listed as ultra rare. It's in very nice condition, like really nice condition. And it has all the signifiers and markings of like the very rare, very, very rare one. And so I decided to put it at auction, and I started the bid at $1,000 because I didn't know where this was. I was like, if I get a bid, then I've sold it for $1,000. If I don't, then I can just redo it at a lower price. But within 24 hours, I had 51 watchers on this item that had a starting bid of $1,000. And then eBay took it off because Pink Floyd got a hold of them and made the phone call. I'm exaggerating, but basically. And I did end up selling that for like $350 to someone in England, but I had to go like a back ways of doing it, so I didn't get the benefit of it flooding onto the market in an auction. But my point is that sometimes when something is so rare, it rarely ever comes up to auction. It rarely ever gets listed. And if it does, it shoots off so quickly that market value just slowly creeps up. But if you can get it at auction and it's something that rarely shows up, then people will pay up for it because they've been looking for it for so long. They don't even care. Like, they will just pay it. And the value of something is what somebody is willing to pay for it. So auction can be used in that way, that if it is something more rare, you're not quite sure of the value and you think it could be potentially higher than what's being listed, and you have to be very cautious because you have to understand you could get less than what you're expecting too, then you can sell it at auction. It's going to get enough attention to where it's worth giving it a try. If you've invested a lot of money into it, don't do it that way. But if you've, if you haven't invested a lot into it, you might as well try to maximize what you're making. The other way I'll use auction is if I'm liquidating. I do this towards the end of December because it's already a busy time, but to boost my sales even more, those items that have sort of been sitting and not getting a lot of action, I'll send them to auction. I'll start them at like $3 or $4, $3, $4, $5, depending on what it is. And a lot of times that's all I get. Sometimes it goes up $10, $20, but most of the time now on eBay, it doesn't really get any momentum. But at that point, I'm basically just trying to clear out inventory, make some sort of profit, or at least not lose money. So auction is a good way to liquidate items also. Otherwise, use buy it now. Another thing to pay attention to with buy it now is the item trending? If you know a certain clothing style or it's getting close to the holiday season and the comps that you've looked at are a little bit lower, go ahead and list it a little bit higher, because if it is really trending or you are going into a seasonal item and if you list it too far out, it'll get lost. But if you're listing it like as it's merging into that season or as it's merging into that trend, you are going to end up getting more for, than what the current comps are. And then there's also, when you're pricing, the number psychology, which is just like side note, but it can help convert sales, which also helps your algorithms. And that is that things listed at a even number like $10, $20, whatever, they somehow psychologically appear a little less professional and they feel a little more stern in the pricing. So it is always better to soften that just a little bit. Give it a different number, $5.29, because you can even go, if you're gonna list it for $5, you can even do $5.19. You can get a little bit of extra money. Some people do the standard like $12.99, $13.99, $14.99. I do like $12.79, $13.79, just because it stands out a little bit differently, and I feel like the weird combination throws people for a loop, and it makes them like look at it a second time. Just do what you want, but I recommend not doing just flat out like $20, $30, $40. Play around with the number combination. Number 8 is shipping. I definitely recommend signing up for the global shipping program at this time. Used to, it was a lot more work doing global shipping because you had to fill out the customs forms and you had to deal with all the repercussions of something not getting delivered and what have you. It was a lot more work, a lot more risk. Now eBay pretty much streamlines it. You send it to them, to eBay, to their eBay hub, one of them. They do all the customs. If the package makes it to them and then the package does not make it to whatever country it's going to, eBay handles that. They do the refunds. They handle all those issues. I would say probably 5 or 6 right now items a week to international buyers. So that significantly increases my income. I don't really see any downsides. The only thing you want to be cautious of is there are certain things you cannot ship overseas. Perfumes, liquids with alcohol, flammable things. Be cautious about those type of things. Know what you cannot put on an aircraft. The only time you can sell perfumes, and first off, they have to be new. They have to be in their original packaging. They have to be packaged a very specific way. They have to be marked on the box a very specific way, and that's even just to ship them within the US. But if you were to ship those overseas, you have to be contracted through either UPS or FedEx. So you can't just send them in USPS. You can't just send them off with UPS without letting UPS know and getting cleared to do that. So do global shipping. Just don't sell flammable products. Which also you can't sell them to Puerto Rico, Alaska, or Hawaii. Anywhere that has to go on an aircraft. I picked the cheapest, most reliable. Ground Advantage at this point, USPS, is for the reliableness, the ease of it, and the cost, in my opinion, is the best option. There are some things I'll ship priority if they have a higher value so that I can get the automatic insurance on it. There are some things that I'll sell or ship first class, like, you know, well, actually, I don't even ship those first class. I ship them through the eBay. eBay has a thing now, if you sell something that fits in like a standard envelope, basically, that's like an ounce or less, and it's not, you know, rigid or some weird shape, it's just flat like a baseball card or something, you can ship it through their program, which costs like 68 cents to $1.28, something like that. And it comes with tracking. So that's the benefit of doing that over first class, is that the letters where you use like stamps or whatever for items that are 1 ounce doesn't come with any tracking, but if you do it through the eBay program, it does. Otherwise, I use the USPS Ground Advantage, but I just opt into cheapest, most reliable. Get used to your shipping increments. So, and this doesn't affect the algorithms, but this is just good practice that will help you overall. The different increments where items go up in price for shipping is 1 ounce, 4 ounce, 8 ounce, 11 ounce, 1 pound, and then from there it goes up by pound up to like 25 pounds. And then it follows a whole new set of rules. The only times that doesn't necessarily apply is if it's regional. They have different increments, like I think it's like 1 to 8 pounds goes for one price, and then 8 to something else goes for another price. But that doesn't affect you too much. And then if the dimensions are way too big. So you do want to measure things, and I think it's like anything over 36 inches for height, width, and length combined goes up based off of measurements, which is not fun. And then you want to decide if you want to do flat rate, calculated, or free, which free is technically under flat rate. Calculated, in my opinion, used to be the way to go. eBay recently started showing, I don't know why they did this, started showing the buyer the eBay discounted calculated shipping, which is a solid 20% less than what it actually cost to ship it, or what the buyer paid. But they don't really take into account the fact that sellers have expenses around shipping, such as shipping materials and labels and ink and, you know, overhead and transporting packages to the post office. So I don't think that was a really fair move, but I get why they did it. They're trying to be competitive, but that used to be the way to go. Now I think that's become a little more complicated. For a while, I went to flat rate shipping, and I would just basically lower the price of my shipping to the very lowest point, because I knew that my discount was going to still cover that shipping cost, and I'd probably still be able to cover my expenses, or at least most of them. Now I've just merged into free shipping, because with all the changes under shipping, at this point, I think it's just easier for people to not have to do the math. It's easier to not have to fluctuate with all the changes. I'm just doing free shipping. I basically take what I think it will cost to ship and I lower it by $1 or $2 and let that eat into my profits. Or depending on how valuable the item is, it might be a few cents depending on how valuable the item is. And then that way I can still have a very competitive price, plus it shows up as free shipping. Free shipping is the only thing that really affects your algorithms. If you overprice shipping, that can affect things. But for the most part, from what I've noticed, the algorithms don't pick up on what you're charging for shipping. Unless it's free. Unless there is no charge. And then your listings will get boosted up. We're almost there. We got number 9 and 10. So number 9 is your preferences as far as how you want to be paid, how many days it takes you to ship something, all of those type of things. Some of these actually have a lot more influence than other things. So don't discard this just because this seems like a little category at the bottom. Many of these have more effect on your algorithm than things that you would think have more effect on your algorithms. I always just do my payments through eBay, which is the first option under your preferences. I don't do any kind of checks or cash or any of that, which oddly is still under preferences. I guess it's for like local pickups and that kind of thing. I would never do that personally. Sounds like a big risk. I do my handling time, which is up to you. I do 1 business day right now. Anything more than 1 business day will actually push you down in the rankings. Some very, understand that many things I've said today do not apply to very large YouTube viewerships and resellers. If they are a reseller and they have a large following, these things are not affected the same way as the average reseller. It just is not 100%. They are getting more views, they're getting more impressions, they're getting more viewer purchases. I don't care what they say. They are getting a significant boost, like huge in some cases. You can see it from their views on items. Their views and their number of watchers will go up very quickly in a matter of like 2 or 3 days on items that normally for the average reseller would sit there for like weeks with very little interaction. So please, please, please understand that everything I say applies to the average reseller who does not have either a large viewership or any viewership. This applies to just the person who's reselling, who just makes sales like a normal reseller. And there's nothing wrong with YouTube resellers. I'm on YouTube now. I haven't monetized. I don't have a huge following yet, but I can guarantee you as my following grows, my sales are going to come up and my algorithms are going to be less important, because my conversion rate is going to be so high that that's going to take over most of all these other rules. With all that being said, your handling time is pretty important. There are YouTube resellers who take a 2 or 3 day handling time. They're selling at a very high rate. They can do that. If you want to do fast and free shipping, you have to opt into at least the 1 day, 1 business day. And it does affect your algorithms. It will push your listing up in it'll boost your posting, your listing. I'm running out of momentum here. But you also have to make sure that you can do that. Your schedule has to be set up in a way that you can achieve that. And if you are uncomfortable trying to maintain a 1 business day shipping, then go ahead and do the 2-day, because even though your listing may get pushed down a little bit because you don't have as fast of a shipping option, what is even worse is if you start getting a late shipment rate because you're not shipping as fast, or you're not printing out your labels as quickly, or you start getting negative feedback because your item took longer to get there than other resellers. So you don't want to put yourself under the gun to the point to where you can mess up. With that being said, I will soon, probably when I move. I don't think I'll do it before I move because things are a little complicated right now. But probably once I move, I will start doing same business day shipping. It won't be easy, but one thing you can do is as long as you print those labels within that time period, that gives you a little bit of a cushion of time. So if for some reason you have your cutoff time at noon and you print off your label at 11, but you can't actually get to the post office till after they close, and you got to put them in a drop box so they don't technically scan in, or you can't even get there till the next morning to drop them off. As long as you printed your shipping labels before that time cutoff, then you're good. You don't want to play with that too much, because I've noticed some people will like print the labels and then not ship for 2 or 3 days. eBay still gives a window of time to the buyer in which their package should be arriving, and if you miss that window of time, if you go beyond that window, it goes to your late shipment rate. So that can take away your top seller, that can affect your algorithms, that can push your listings down, that can lower your sales. So don't play with that too much. But that is a little hint. If for some reason something comes up and you have opted into like same day or 1 business day shipping or whatever, as long as you get those labels printed off and then you take those packages immediately the next morning or that night and drop them in a drop box or whatever you need to do to get them as quickly as you can there, you're going to be fine. There is an option to require immediate payment, which I used to use because people were very abusive for a while of signing up to buy something and then not paying for it for like days, like it was a layaway program or something. eBay did come in finally, and they put stricter rules around when they have to pay, and they also started dinging people's accounts if they don't pay in that time frame. And they put the language in their contract, like when you sign up for your account, that if you agree to buy something, then you are in agreement to buy it. So if you don't end up buying it, then it can reflect poorly on your account. And at some point, if you do it too often, they can shut you down. So once they started to take it more seriously, I went ahead and opted out of the immediate payment so that people could, if they wanted to buy something but couldn't pay until Thursday or Friday, or if they were like an overseas buyer, because sometimes they process through like a warehouse or something like that to get the item to them, and that payment ends up taking 2 or 3 days. It just makes it easier for me to convert sales, and then now eBay sort of has my back and gets people to pay. So I no longer turn that on. That requires immediate payment. I would recommend not turning it on at this point because eBay does take those extra precautions. Just understand that sometimes if you don't have that switched on, people can take 2 or 3 days. So if you're reliant on that money, then you need to switch it on. If you are not reliant on having that money immediately, then you can just switch it off and it'll help boost your sales. The return policy is also another thing, along with your handling time, that ends up being way more important than you would think it would be. Not only to be a top rated seller, you have to have a certain, I think it's at least a 14-day. They may have changed it recently. But you have to have a pretty solid return policy. To really boost your algorithms, you need a 30-day. And that might even be the standard now. But if you have no returns on all of your items, if you have like 7-day, I don't think that's even an option anymore. Anyways, 30-day return policy is where it's at. That's what's going to meet the rules of the algorithms, and it's going to boost your listings. I do require that the buyer pays the return shipping, because I'm a small business and I cannot have people just buying things and changing their minds consistently and then me shelling out the extra money to have them return it to me, because I would just be losing money all over the place. If I was selling at a much higher level, like if I start making it to where I'm like netting well over 100K a year or something, I might go ahead and opt into that, because it does help your algorithms if you have free returns. But at this point, business-wise, I don't feel like it's a smart decision. I also, if it's not a mistake of mine, if somebody just gets something and they decide they don't want it, or they realize they spent too much money and they need their money back, or whatever silly reason they decide to return it, if it's not something I messed up on, I also do not refund them the initial cost of me shipping it to them. Because any cost or any amount of money that I lose on shipping per transaction just eats away very quickly at any potential profit that I can make. And in these times, people have gotten way too comfortable buying things and then just returning them. So I am pretty strict about what I will pay or refund to a buyer as far as shipping costs. But you do need really just go ahead and sign up for the 30-day return. I know it sucks. Nobody wants to do it, but it's one of those things. Then the very final thing is promoting. Do you want to promote your listing? This is just another thing. Another thing where I'm slightly disappointed. I get why they did it. Now look, I will talk another time about how, like, you'll never see me bashing eBay, because I go into this understanding business. I understand the platform. I don't have the ability to create my own platform. If I did, I would do that, but I don't. So I rely on eBay or some other platform. To be competitive and to continue growing, it costs money, and businesses have to make decisions and they have to maximize their profit. That is, by definition, what a corporation is responsible to do to its shareholders, which is maximize their profits. So I get it. You'll never see me just bashing eBay or any selling platform. But I am slightly disappointed with the promotions, because it definitely pulled in wholesalers out of other countries that are selling horrible, low quality items for very low prices with shipping that's basically non-existent. It brought in big retail giants. It brought in brand names selling right off of eBay. And those companies can afford to promote at high rates and even sell enough to where sometimes they don't even have to promote. It kind of long term doesn't make a lot of sense, because if you need to promote to be sustainable, then essentially everybody needs to promote to be sustainable, which means the promotion doesn't really work to be sustainable, which means eBay's just making more money and nobody is necessarily being promoted. But you can use promotions as a tool, and that is what I choose to do. During, like right now with it being slow, as of like 3 or 4 days ago, I went ahead and put all of my items at a 5% promotion. And it's already started to pay off. Like yesterday I netted like $200, which was the bulk of what I netted last week. So it is already starting to help. So you can use it for slow periods. If you really, really want to maximize your weekend sales, because weekends, that's when everybody sort of gets boosted to the top that has a lot of experience, you can turn on the promotions just for the weekend to kind of boost your sales over the weekend. If there are items that have like a high competitiveness where your item might get sort of washed out, especially if you're a new reseller, you can boost it some that way by promoting it. Sometimes if your sales just sort of become stagnant or things are sitting there for too long, you can try boosting your listings through promotions that way. But you do want to be kind of selective about it. I think the lowest you can go is like 2%. I think. I don't recommend doing 2%. Between 2 and 4%, I haven't noticed too much of a result. So I feel like you're just giving money away at that point and not really getting anything out of it. Anything over 10%, I don't notice much of a difference from 10%. So I feel like the Goldilocks zone is somewhere around 5 to 10%. Otherwise, you're probably just giving away more money than it's actually going to benefit you. If you do promote, when you're promoting, you want to pay close attention to your numbers, because you want to make sure that you are bringing in significantly more money than what you are paying in extra fees. Because if you're paying an extra $200 that week in promoted fees and your sales only went up $150, then you've just lost. I mean, you might have sold more, but you've paid them more to not make any more. And you're probably working harder because now you're shipping more items. So it has to be benefiting you. If I'm promoting, I want to see 100% more sales versus what I pay out in promoted fees. That's like a minimum for me. If I start seeing it fall below that, then I take the promotions off. Be careful if you do promote and then you start taking promotions off, say you've done it to your entire store. Incrementally over like a week or so, start ending promotions, maybe by category or by groups of 50 or whatever. Because if you do end all your promotions at one time, then your sales will dip pretty significantly for usually about a 4 or 5 day period, from what I've noticed. Other than that, I don't really know what to say else about promotions. It's one of those things, again, it's just something you gotta feed the monster. Use it as a tool. One other thing, don't use it on categories. Sorry. I literally never talk this much. Don't use it on categories that is not going to benefit from. long tail items like crafting items that don't get a lot of views or sell very slowly, things with lower sell-through rates, you know, vintage photos, ephemera, things that might sit there for a while. Promoting them does absolutely nothing, in my opinion. I have noticed no significant change in how often they sell or how fast they sell based off of promotions. And that's just the nature of the item. They just don't get a lot of action, a lot of views. People aren't searching for them a lot. And because a lot of times those things are so individualized or hard to find the right keywords to even describe them, they're hard to search for. So most of those items sell simply by people just like scrolling and coming upon them. Promoting them is going to do almost nothing for you. Use them for those things that may not necessarily have a high sell-through rate, but still have a strong potential to sell, and you just don't want to get them lost in the mix. And then be cautious about how much you promote them for and what your numbers look like. The very last thing under promotions is the donation. And this is a complete, I didn't even put this under the 10 things that I was going to go over. But this is something I plan on experimenting with. Because I do know that having the whole benefits charity under your listing actually does help. Not only do people want to support that, but I've noticed they tend to get pushed up somewhere in the middle to upper zone, not necessarily the very top, but somewhere middle to upper. And then people, you know, they're more likely to buy if they feel like something's going to charity. And so I was thinking a few weeks ago, what if instead of promoting, or maybe even doing a handful of the other things that I do, what if I took that cost and put it into charity? Because I much rather give 7% of my sales to, you know, some sort of autism awareness or, you know, something, than to just hand it back to eBay. I'm sorry, eBay. I love you. But if I'm going to pay more money, I much rather give it to charity. So I do plan, I'm not sure when. I'm thinking maybe next January, unless I just get squirrely in the next few months. I do plan on experimenting and taking probably a fairly large portion of my inventory and taking it off any type of promotion or anything like that would cost me extra fees, and then taking that percentage and applying it to charity and seeing how significantly my sales change. Seeing if they go up, stay the same, or go down. So that is yet to be established. This has turned into a very long video. So for those of you who are here, you are very committed people, and I appreciate it. But I want to be thorough. I want to give my experience. I don't just want to say, do this, do this, do this. I want to give reasons behind it. So I hope that I accomplished that. I hope I helped. And I don't know, I just kind of enjoy it too. I kind of enjoy being nerdy about reselling every once in a while. So I'm going to get off of here because you have definitely watched me long enough. And I gotta get some things packaged, taken to the post office, and then I'm probably gonna crash because I worked through the night. We'll see how it goes. The next video is going to get more into detail. It probably won't be this long because there's not as many things to discuss, but it will. I'm going to give more detailed information about inventory, handling the inventory, how to be creative in your listings to get things sold basically how to use particular items in the inventory to boost your sales and your algorithms. So that one I think will be a little bit more fun than this one, but this is definitely a really good basis for getting consistent listings that help your algorithms. All right. Y'all have a good day. I'm so sorry. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Bye.